All right, it's the English in English podcast.
Yeah, that's Brett.
That's Eric.
And we're back with more truth knowledge for your ear holes.
Oh, yeah.
Squirrel into your brain hole.
Slather that truth knowledge.
With our truth DNA.
Exactly. You'll get pregnant with our truth babies
up in
your brain.
You'll have a truth baby come out of your mouth from a brain pregnant with knowledge.
And to make it less creepy, we mean you'll be able to speak the truth after you hear the truth.
Right.
But that truth baby's going to roll off your tongue. Well, now we've sufficiently creeped everyone out.
Exactly.
Let's move on. Topics at hand.
You know what's funny is I'll just mention a few of the topics that we're gonna cover.
Yeah.
We'll cover the continued Trumpening.
Yes, exactly.
We'll cover
it's impossible not to cover
leg dropping Gawker.
Yes.
And in reference to those specific items, just one comment on Twitter that's hilarious, was referring to both of those things and maybe a few other things, was just like, I forget who it was, where he said, "Wait, when did everything start going so right?" That was hilarious.
Yeah.
So let's do the Hulk Hogan thing first, because
it's the most salacious and interesting about law
was all the people coming out and acting like it was a defeat for free speech of some kind. And I am one of the biggest free speech people out there.
Well,
but the interesting thing about this is that the story is the speech. Right. No one's saying they shouldn't have found out about something that happened and talked about it. Anyone can do that. Anyone should be allowed to do that. And I will be the first person to say you can literally say
written about that
or say whatever
ad nauseum with
and
no
I think they could have even someone gave them the picture as evidence. So they say, "Wow, we know this is true. It happened." They write the story. Even if they put one image of a screenshot, not even showing it nudity, but showing hey, there is a video of this kind of thing. Right. I don't think anything would have happened to them.
No,
but the fact that they just put it out there, the whole thing.
It was one of those things where I have to imagine that part of it is the dumbness of the modern media. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, somebody gets an anonymous video like this.
So it was recorded surreptitiously.
Recorded surreptitiously, given to you anonymously, basically, so you received it without the consent of the persons involved. It was recorded on private property.
This was in Florida, too. And in Florida, it's an all-party consent state.
Right,
for private communications like
that.
And
so it was filmed not in a public area.
So it could have been illegal.
Right, so the person who took the video could have been making the video illegally.
Although it was in their house, so who knows?
Well, it turns out they think that the video was made by
the owner of the house.
The owner of the house, whose
really
wife
weird
he
situation.
was. Yeah, there was some weird swinger shit going on, and they were like, "Hulk Hogan, you feeling sad?" He's like, "Well, F my
bang my wife."
And he's
like, "All right,
okay."
So then then he hides in the closet and films it
or something. Yeah, exactly.
So weird.
Oh yeah, let me film you.
He had a cuckold fetish or something.
Right? Yeah, something like that.
But whatever, that's neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there.
Then the guy.
Then the issue was somebody annonomously sent it to Gawker,
which was probably
10 years later. So you don't know.
It wasn't 10 years later.
It was 10 years later, after the video was originally made. Apparently, that was part of the thing that was weird about it.
Years ago.
Well, it could have been because when this first started was 2012, so that's already
right. But I think
4 years
it was
ago.
Filmed fairly because it was filmed after he was
filmed in the midst of his divorce proceedings.
Right,
it was not yet.
It was probably happened 5 years ago.
5 years now. It's 10 years old at this point.
Almost because it was 2012.
Yeah,
was when it came out.
Right. So
4 years ago.
They didn't give an exact date of when it was filmed.
But
I just know that's irrelevant. I just know the news source
is
saying roughly decade-old video.
There's no love lost for Gawker because they're a bunch of idiots.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. What's so crazy about it is I don't think if let's say CNN or even TMZ got this, they wouldn't have been as stupid as to take the illegally obtained video and put it on the internet in total.
Right. Just a total video to spam. Because and what's especially hilarious is the media in general, but even Gawker themselves had come out really strongly condemning everyone for showing the pictures of Jennifer Lawrence and the other actresses that were basically the exact same fucking thing.
Somebody obtains somebody else's video and pictures
of private
and
stuff
shares it.
And they were condemning that. And they're like, you raving hypocrites. You literally just like this person, so it's bad. Don't like this person, so it's okay.
Exactly.
And then they're like, New York snark didn't play well in court either.
Right,
This stupid shit.
There was some weird shenanigans going on there. With
so it's hilarious to see them get
but I think it was
$115 million.
I think the most important part is Gawker took it in the teeth.
Right,
the more important for the long term is that
because I never saw this as being a free speech issue.
Yeah, it's not a free speech issue.
No one said they shouldn't have written the article, or I mean, even if you think you're a dick for doing it, no one was saying that was a violation. Right. This was more about privacy than was free speech.
Well, it's more about they took something it was not theirs.
Damaging and privacy.
Video is data. You've stolen somebody's data. Okay,
well, that wasn't them. They didn't steal it.
Okay,
it was all about publicizing.
Technically, you're trading in stolen goods at that point.
Right, but this was a civil case, so they weren't dealing with any criminal aspects.
Right, but I'm saying like from a journalistic morals standpoint, and whether or not it's free speech versus privacy, this is obviously a case of privacy because you're taking something that the other person did not consent to having shown.
Right.
It was a completely private document.
Right.
And somebody without their consent shares it, and then you also do the same thing without their consent, share it. So
and not just like
just because you're twice removed. Oh well, somebody else gave it to me. Well, they gave you a stolen object, so you can't share that or sell that. Technically, you're selling it because you're making ad revenue.
Right. So if it's like if someone stole something from your house and gave it to you, then you're like, wow, and it's publicized, and you're like, I didn't steal it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna profit off of it.
Right. Well, it's the same thing as like pirated movies. That if you set up a movie theater showing pirated movies,
you're like, I'm not the one who downloaded it.
I didn't download it.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody handed it to me, and then I sold tickets.
See if that plays.
See if that plays. Exactly. Yeah. So that was the aspect.
But if you said, hey, then you wrote a story in the newspaper, someone stole this whole movie and played it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
You can make an argument for what, like, moral argument, whether that's cool to, like,
air
people's dirty
free
laundry.
Speech-wise,
but free speech-wise, that's fine. Right.
But this is not free speech for the reasons I've already detailed. This is like I said, it becomes absurdly obvious when you change the metaphor slightly. Right. It's like, hey.
Well, it's funny because it's even obvious, like, these type of people, like, they were against the whole fappening is what they called it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They're against, like, the so-called revenge porn. Like, everyone thinks that. It's like,
what
was this if not that?
Wrong.
How is this any different from, like, a revenge
showing someone's
thing?
sex content without their consent is wrong. Well,
then
guess what?
Yeah, exactly.
Guess what you just did?
But it was especially weird because this wasn't like a website that just did it for anyone.
Right.
They specifically had come out and said that they thought that was, like, wrong and lambasted people for...
Both on their subsidiary sites and, their main ones.
So it'll be nice to see Jezebel.
Right, yeah.
Gawker,
hopefully all gets sold out.
Kotaku. Well, what's interesting is Mike Cernovich of Danger and Play, who I know I mentioned him before, he's a lawyer. So they were talking about the specific
I saw that video where he was talking about his other legal acquaintance of his, a lawyer acquaintance.
Mark
and they were talking about
where he said that, like, in Florida specifically, the way, which I don't necessarily think this is right, I hate the way the appeals process works in general, but in this case, it'll at least hurt the right people.
Yeah.
But to even appeal, I think you have to put up, like, a non-refundable bond of 10% of the judgment. So it's a $115 million judgment. So even to appeal it, they have to permanently give up $10 or $15 million or $10 or $11 million.
Right. Yeah.
Which is kind of ridiculous. I think that's the way it works, because if it ends up being ruled as a bogus ruling, then you've just lost.
I don't know if it's permanently. I know maybe it goes into escrow.
Maybe it's not permanent, but I thought someone had said.
I think they're saying you're not. Otherwise, you're just giving out a payment. But I think it's a bond that you have to get up. But I mean,
I thought they said it was lost. Like, it's just gone.
Maybe. That's kind of
brutal.
rough.
I know, that's what I mean. Like, that's
if not, though,
because not all rulings
if not, though, it's just an escrow. It's still ruinous because you're going to have another 6 months to a year of appeals.
And these companies aren't going to have money. They don't have $10 million liquid.
10 million liquid, like, sitting around to hold into this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said their entire revenues was $44 million for last year, and I doubt they're running a profit margin of 10 million of that, or 10, that would be profit.
44 million was their entire revenue.
Yeah,
that seems a little small to me, but
you're talking about just websites. I
mean, well, I mean that's one
thing. Shitload of money from just a couple websites.
That's true, but that's the thing that's hurting like media in general. It's just that this is something that fascinates me because I didn't do it with media companies, but I worked for some like software companies and like in the video game space for a while,
right?
And like. So dealt with like purchasing ads on like video game related websites and web ad stuff a lot. Got to see a little bit behind the scenes of that more than just you see from doing something on YouTube, right? In terms of like pre-buying a lot of ads versus like YouTube, you parcel out, you get your something. The thing is, they don't pay that much. Like even though YouTube gets a lot of money because they're just doing so many millions, and then they give it around to
they're doing billions of hits.
Yeah, and so they're probably not getting paid a heck of a lot more than they're paying out to the YouTube persons.
Right.
It's just that...
Yeah, if you're actually getting a lot of traffic, straight up advertising is not the best way to make money. Yeah. Like, all the websites that are making, like, hundreds of thousands, like some dude has his website and is making shitload of money, that's mostly affiliate sales or direct sales of something that they're selling.
Patreon stuff and everything.
Or something like
that. Middle-level people.
But I mean, like, high-level stuff, it's usually affiliate sales or just sales. Something is being sold. It's not just ads.
Right, yeah. But the thing is that advertisement dollars in terms of television to the internet is horribly skewed. And I get it because television's still the big king in town. More people watch television than have internet. Right. But at the same time, it's like, it's just so weird because it is the future, but they're like unwilling to catch up. Their brains are stuck. Like you're paying several $1 million for 30-second ad on a TV show that gets 100,000 to 1 million people.
Exactly.
You got a website that guarantees the same amount, and you can see who they are, so to speak. You know what part of the country they're coming from. You know what their interests are. You can target so specifically, and you're paying 10 cents a view.
Right.
You know,
with with my YouTube stuff, I've had imagine if you had a show that got 7 million views. Right. You could charge for an internet.
Spot, a TV ad
for a TV spot
for 30 seconds.
I mean, they'd be tens or $100,000 for each ad, probably.
Right.
And so when you look at it that way, I've had 7 million or more views combined,
in total,
and have made a total of like $25,000 or $30,000
over years
for just over those 7 million views.
Right. Yeah.
Total. Well, that would be like one thing.
So
one commercial would have to pay that
much. 1/10 to 1/50 amount that you could
or
get.
less, because that would be like each commercial would be paying that much.
Right.
Each ad break, you know what I mean,
exactly.
for this one show. So it's way cheaper. But also, I think what makes it interesting is that the barriers to entry mean that, like a site like Gawker or a chain of sites like Gawker, they have a lot of employees. Yeah. But they're not necessarily getting any more ad revenue than some guy who has one dude just sitting there typing and gets just as many hits.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm saying. Like, eventually something's
going to
have
get more
change
just because they're spending
there's
more.
not going to be enough money to keep those industries going. There aren't going to be new
I've
sites
even seen that. I've even said there will be. It'll just be like I said, like some guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There's not going to be these big conglomerates. Which
unless
cool with that.
It's cool in some way, but in other ways, it means like in order for people to make enough of a living to do it, it's just one of those things that's a problem in general. With I see in the next 50 years, the things that our society's going to have to face that we won't really have had to face before is there's just because of the way technology goes, there's going to be far more people than there are going to be jobs for them to do.
Yeah.
Even if everyone worked as hard as they could, they just won't need them.
Especially with everything's automated and stuff.
Right. You're just not going to need people.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see.
Like, how is that going to shake out in terms of structuring your society?
It's going to be ugly at first.
Like, yes, okay, welfare and other things, as a conservative, you got to admit that welfare is not good for people. It doesn't help them do anything with their lives. But at the same time, it's like, but you can't say go get a job. By the way, there's no jobs.
Right.
We put robots everywhere.
Right. But then at the same time, if there's no money being spent, then no one will be making money. So
right. So it's like this weird loop of how is this going to pan out, because nobody's going to be having jobs to spend money. So except for people
what it really comes down to is, like Chris Martin says, you have to focus on first order wealth, which is actual resources.
Yes.
So if you need, like, no matter what happens, people are going to need to eat. They're going to need to, like, fucking buy a farm.
Right, yeah.
Buy some stock in a robotics company and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
That's what I want to
things that manufacture.
It's like, I want to know how to get involved somehow with these companies that are going to be making the McDonald's robots.
Right, yeah.
Because I know it's coming. I know it's coming. I just need to figure out how to get in on it. Because I can't go out there and build them myself.
Right.
So
the other thing is
find out which companies are going to be doing it.
The other thing is, of course, that, and this is where it gets me, it's weird with people who, like, support welfare programs or protections for, like minimum wage and stuff like that.
Or industry-type protections.
Industry-type protections is like, okay, I understand why some of those are necessary just because, or some of those could be argued for in the sense of, like, not necessarily minimum wage, but, like, industry protections saying, like, we keep manufacturing jobs here. Right. Like, protections and tariffs and things like that to say we keep manufacturing jobs here. I would support those kinds of actions. But people who say, like, I want minimum wage, but then they still don't make the disconnect of, if you constantly have immigration and you just give welfare and stuff to everyone, it's not going to work. Like, these protections work when you protect us, so to speak. Right. You know what I mean? Like, the whole point is to say, if everybody in the world gets treated the same, there's not going to be enough to go around, so let's look after our own first.
Right.
And that sounds so scary and selfish. It's like, but that's why you have a nation.
Right.
This is us, and let's take care of us first, then we can take care of anyone else if we want to.
And they do that in every other aspect of their lives, but for some reason they can't extrapolate that to, like, they get, like, if you just if you were like, hey, homeless people, you can come stay at my house, it would become an instant shit show. Right. But they don't realize that the same holds true for countries.
Right. That's the other thing. We've talked about this before on the show, I think, but like morality scales surprisingly, and people don't get it. They think if it gets big enough, it's some esoteric weird thing where you could bend the rules of math and law, and
that's Schiff always says that too. Right, it's like they're like, oh, that's a simplified version, and like, look, if it doesn't even work, like, obviously the complex things work differently than the simple things on, like, a grand scale
in certain ways,
but the fundamentals don't work any differently.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't even work at a simple level, it's not going to work on a big level.
The only reason it seems like it at a big level is because it moves in such slow motion, you don't know.
Well, there's a capacity to absorb some, like, slippage, or what?
Right, exactly. Like you said, you would notice immediately if you let 100 people onto your property to squat.
Right.
Versus you don't know it's in your country because you're not going to feel the impact.
It's sort of like if I piss into a gallon of water and I'm like, dude, I can't drink that now. Versus if I piss into a lake and you're like, you can drink the water. So it's like, yeah, you can. But it is still contaminating water. Right. It's just not contaminating the whole thing. But if everyone pisses into the lake, it's exactly the same. It's fucked up.
Yeah, exactly.
But they say, like, no, because they don't see the immediate effect that they act like it's not a problem. And it's like, it's still fucking up just as much water every time someone pisses into it.
And that's the thing for me, like, we'll go back a little bit now to, like, the campaigns and stuff, but, like, Bernie supporters and other stuff like that. It's like, I get the impulse to say we need to rein in certain businesses and stuff that's become globalist and not, but they don't think of it that way. They don't think of it as, like, getting rid of globalist business policies and advocating nationalist business policies.
They're looking at symptoms and what they want the outcome to be.
Right.
And,
They're not thinking about, like, hey, look, you can't enact a proper, democratic style socialism, like a mild socialism, without there being some sort of national. That's why it's worked okay, not perfect, but okay.
They'll point to countries
in European
where, like,
countries.
And it can, quote unquote, work. I mean, obviously, you could make a system where it works if people are willing to tolerate it, whether or not it's morally correct. But it works for certain reasons, and most of the time, like when not every population group is willing to just be like pay that much taxes and still work. Like when you have countries like Denmark and stuff, all these people are still working, still having jobs, and they're just willing to pay 50, 60, 70% taxes. Right. And okay, I don't think that's morally correct to force it, and I don't even want to do it, but obviously if it can go along, then whatever. Who cares?
If they want that, that's their country.
But when you have a bunch of people who are just going to be on the receiving end of all the social programs and not putting anything in, then it can't work.
Yeah, and not only that, it's that it's just like like you said, differences in the size and the group. It's going to have different outcomes based on the
well, they're like culturally homogenous. They're all interested in this system working out.
Right. When you have a bunch of people by them for them.
Right. It's by them for them. So it's more like a family doing. Like if a family says, you know what, we're just all going to pool our money and then pay all the bills for everyone. So if you have a rough day, it doesn't matter. That works when everyone is dedicated to this system working. But if you have some deadbeat who comes up and it's just like, you know what, cool.
I came from another country because I hear you have
or
freebies.
Another family from next door because I heard that you guys just split all your bills. You don't make anyone pay individually.
Yeah.
Then that.
I mean, that's already happening to an extent. Like when we're talking about certain. Every state pays taxes into the federal system, but then certain states get a disproportionate amount of federal money back for social programs. A lot of them just have that's already net losses. And it's already messing up the system where it's obvious that America's too big, too many different countries.
That's why it's bizarre to see people make it all this a racial issue when you're like, it has nothing to do with race. It wouldn't matter if it was a bunch of Hitler's dream children, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Polish people flooding in. Right, yeah. You know what I mean? It would still be causing the same problems.
Right, yeah. You put in too many people.
It's about math.
Right, yeah, it's just math. Like when you don't have enough jobs anyway. I mean, there's the cultural aspect. It's going to change things culturally. Right. But even if, like you said, even if that was for a race that was like, or a group or culture that came in and was like, turns out we actually are better than you. Well, guess what? It's still going to be bad for you. It doesn't matter.
Unless you prefer their culture.
Right, unless you prefer their culture.
And to that extent.
If all of Japan moved here, like, Japan is pretty peaceful. It probably wouldn't affect crime rates. It would still change society,
Right, it would be Japan then.
Right, yeah.
It wouldn't be America anymore. And we always say this, like, it doesn't matter if you... It's not about whether you think that's good or bad. That's a value statement. The point is, if you put 100 million Japanese people in a few states, those would become Japan. They wouldn't be American anymore.
Right, they'd be Japan colonies. Right. And that could be good, that could be bad.
But America doesn't work the way that it does because of where it is, and this special spot in the ground just works that way. Right. It's because of the people making this aggregate of decisions a certain way over generations.
Right, exactly. They tend towards a certain idea about how their society should be structured.
And that's how every country's ended up the way it has.
Right.
To some minor, difference. Obviously, if someone gets like carpet bombed, then it's not going to end up the way it would have if they'd just been left alone. But the point being, a culture and the way a country runs is there because of the aggregate of decisions that have been made by that population group over the past generations. Yeah, exactly. So when you bring in another population group, it's not just going to keep running the way it does.
Right. Exactly.
It's just like pissing. And on top of that, not to say that any population group is the piss per se, but different chemicals just mix it in.
You mix oil and water.
Right.
Both are useful, but it's just not going to mix permanently. It alters the.
It just is what it is. Yeah. Just like when, and it's so easy for them to understand that happened to the American Indians when we showed up.
Right.
But they just refuse to accept that would happen the other way around.
Or they view it as like good,
that's the crux of it. Is they don't think that there's a worthwhile like culture or anything to be saved because it's just the evil white. It's like Equensuocha.
Right. Yeah.
White devil.
Yeah. But what it's so funny about it to me is I understand that weird. I mean, I don't get it, because I don't share it. I don't see how you reach it, but I understand what it is that's preying upon that mentality.
Right.
But I don't understand. I mean, I also again understand people are stupid. They don't think.
But beyond
through.
that, like,
but beyond that, I'm like, how can you be that stupid?
Right.
Exactly, like that. You want to enact these monetary and social programs while at the same time constantly expanding the amount of people you're going to give them to. It can't work. You know, like it can't work.
Literally
America.
work.
If all of America had like stopped immigration in the 60s like they thought, and then decided it wanted to go the way of Bernie Sanders style stuff, decided, you know what, we're all going to pitch in, we're all going to give everybody a little. It might have worked. It would have been. It would have been burden some of the people who don't want that kind of society to be paying that much to be a part of a society they had no ability to leave, but monetarily it could have been done.
Exactly, and that's what I've said to someone before. Is I'm like, you can take any system of government, and this is why I try to. When people the key element they miss is human behavior, flaws of human nature.
Right.
Is you can take any quote unquote system of government, communism, socialism, fascism, free market capitalism. Right. Any one of them will quote unquote work if everyone is just dedicated to the system working. Right. And none of them really work well if it's freeloaders or people who don't give a shit. So I always say, we need to choose the one that rewards the behavior that you want and punishes the behavior that you don't. And the only one that really does that is when you have at least somewhat of a free market system. Right. Where if you do the right things, you can get rewarded. And no system also keeps anyone, like, bad things from happening to people.
Right, yeah. That's the other thing. That's just another logical... logical fallacy is not even the right word, but it's just... I think that's just a wishful thinking that flies a lot of people. Yeah, it's a delusion. A lot of people think that if we just get this, it'll end all these group of bad things from happening.
This really dangerous view that, like, they don't accept human nature for what it is. That people are just not going to make rational decisions all the time. Right. Especially when it's not in their immediate self-interest.
They can't there's even as they do it, they can't imagine that they think if they just get the structures in place, they can't remember that human beings are largely self-interested.
We're monkeys. We're just monkeys still.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, well, not only that, but it's just like it's genetically programmed to want...
Not only self-interest, but you don't always work in your real self-interest. Right. You work in what you think is your immediate most utility right then for most gratification. Exactly. Like some people have a time horizon that doesn't allow them to actually work in their own self-interest.
Right. Yeah.
It's just whatever their monkey suit is feeling.
They work in their self-interest even against their self-interest because like taking drugs, like, oh, that makes me feel good
because
now.
You have to
my
understand
self-interest.
The meat suit. Like people's minds are not their bodies, and a lot of people are slave to their bodies and their brains. Right. And so they make decisions like someone chasing a heroin high is not working in their own self-interest. Really, it's terrible for them. It's killing their body. It's taking all their money. But it still is
a self-interest loop that is
because that is their strongest desire at that point. Right. So that is their only interest. It's just not actually helping them. Right. And that's an extreme example.
Well, that's the two levels.
It's like the meat suit.
There's not only that, but I'm saying like there's the two levels that they're not addressing. Is that there's the collective interest, and not everybody's going to go for that. Some are going to go for self-interest, but beyond that, some people can't even go for their self-interest.
They can't even go for their own long-term self-interest. Yeah, so you can take someone like a sociopath who is working logically in their own self-interest. They're just not interested in if that matters for anyone else.
Right. So they're not going to game the system just for them.
And those people, that could be up to 4% of the population. Right. That alone, right there, throws off any attempt to make like an equitable quote-unquote system. Right. Because there's a certain number of people who are going to... You can take any rule in any sport. Right. And if you don't like ruthlessly enforce it, some team will just exploit it until they win every game. Right. Exactly. That's why every single game they would do it because they're just going to... If you're not going to do it, we will. Right, and that's how. In that you can't have that when you have the exploiters 1% or less, or it could be a 0.25% if they have that social.
So I mean, like the problem is like
sociopathic tendency.
Even if it's not sociopathic, I mean, but you have some people who just don't care enough to really try to help the general good.
And then you have some people who actively
exploit, and then you have some people who are too stupid or addicted or something to even work in their
own self-interest. Right. They're never going to get to the point where they're worried about is this good for society.
Right. Exactly.
They're just not even. They're not even doing what they need to do
to better their own life
or continue it for that
matter. Yeah. To even survive the next couple months.
So I mean, and that's why there's a lot of people, even in like libertarian and anarchist circles, who they totally disregard that aspect of human nature. And I'm like,
and I get it. I was attracted to the ideas of like straight libertarianism for a long time, just because.
I still think it's correct.
Well, I still think it's correct in the sense of like reducing big government.
The difference is that they think that like if government was just gone, everything would work out. I'm like, look, one of the best quotes, I think it was Gerald Celente said it. I'm like, there's no they. The they is us. It's other people making these decisions. It's not like all of a sudden if we took a brain shackle off everyone's neck, everyone would be like, yay. People don't, just like we just said, people aren't even doing enough to maximize their freedom now. What makes you think they would do it if you took away government completely? They'd clamor for something secure. You know, like people can do a lot of things to make their lives more free now, and they're not doing it. They're willingly giving up their freedoms.
Right.
So you
another
take away government completely. I think it should be voluntary.
I have this thought, and I like this. You'd be a good person to talk to about this. I was speaking with somebody else, and they're a kind of a pretty hardcore libertarian voluntarist type person, and the thing to me is like exactly the same kind of conversation we're having. Like it's good in the sense of if it did work, it would be great. But the problem is it's not acknowledging certain aspects of human nature, or it's not willing to face how much of a problem those would create for your system.
Right.
Because, like, to me, here's one of the problems that some people don't think. Feudalism kind of was libertarianism.
Right.
Because if everything is just the property right of the owner, the guy who owns the most land, owns the most stuff, becomes the central power.
Right.
And then eventually it grows into those guys start grouping up and becomes a big... So it just loops back.
Right.
We already had libertarianism.
Right.
But because of human nature being what it was, most people clamped on to the rich guy, and the rich guy just said, okay, work my land. Or the powerful one. And and he said, okay, work my land. And then the king said, you know what, you other rich guys, you work for me, and I will give you some land and more land.
Because that's how humans work. They look for structure, and a lot of them don't even want positions of leadership or ownership, even of their own lives.
Right.
They just don't want to have to worry.
Right.
And that's when that's even a moderate percentage of the population, these things don't work. I still think that there's a way, I don't think it'll ever happen, but I still think it would be morally correct to have a voluntary sort of government in the same way that you have. But then again, I don't think that means you should be able to do whatever you want at all times. Like, I think a lease is voluntary.
Right.
And then still, if you say, shit, I don't want to live here anymore, you're still going to owe the guy because you made that decision already. And I think government should be sort of the same way. I do think it's fucked up that just by being born in a certain geopolitical location, you're supposedly subject to some bogus social contract, taxes. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this could be a hard one to fight, though.
No, I'm just saying on a moral level. Obviously, this is never going to happen.
Right, because the same reason you don't get to pick your parents, you don't get to pick where you
But I mean, like, you're living in a country where you literally have to pay to
give
up your citizenship.
You could make some healthy thing where, like, other places have posited, like, again,
I think you can make a citizenship contract. Like, I'm a citizen.
Basically, when you hit this age of majority kind of thing,
and it could be for like 3 years, and then you re-up. If you don't want it at that point, then you can leave free and clear.
Right, or something where it's.
But I'm a libertarian nationalist, so I think that. Like, I believe in private property. This is what I tell people. Like, there's a lot of libertarians out there who are for open borders because you're stupid.
Right.
And I say, I believe in private property, whether that's me and my house, whether that's me and you and your house next door, or whether it's 1,000 of us in a whole quote-unquote state or country. What's the difference?
Yeah.
This is our area. We control who comes in and out for
our
own
benefit. You could form a conglomerate organization called the Nation, and it's all if it was all voluntary, then it would still be libertarian.
Right, and just like a voluntary person can own their house and not just let everyone come in whenever they feel like it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That goes back to what we're saying. Is people just don't extrapolate it to the simple and the fundamental, which it still works. It's like, you as a libertarian don't let everybody into your house, but you're willing to let everybody into your border. Why?
Right.
Just because you're for this. But again, that goes back to what we
talked
about
idea of freedom, which doesn't really make any sense.
It doesn't make, but also they're fetishizing the free market as a deity. Like, the free market will guide things. Just do whatever that it acts the free market.
Like, don't even use that. Say market forces.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Because like the free market, a lot of people, and you get this a lot because a lot of people don't want to be religious anymore. They think of that as backwards, and so they just start. But the problem is that human beings, being what they are, they still latch onto something as a guiding truth.
They still want a purpose.
They still want a truth or a purpose,
cause or whatever.
And that's all that religion was. Even though it was obviously, like every human thing, misused and did plenty wrong. It was something that just said, here's what we believe is the foundational truth that you should organize your life around.
Right.
Well, guess what? Communism's foundational truth to organize life around. They don't have a god, so to speak,
it's a state,
but they just have the state and the dialectic.
Or the class. And
or like the history of the dialectic of history that guides all humanity towards this evolution it must obtain, and it has to do it. Says who?
Right.
God? It sounds like you're saying a declaration of God and these forces of destiny to me.
Right.
And like the free market says, and like big F free market,
that's why
market
I would describe myself
reaches its hand and
as a libertarian nationalist, because like I said, but to me that's not even a stretch, because it's just all you're saying is I believe that private property can exist.
Right.
Whether that's owned by one person or owned by about 350 million collectively. Because the way it's supposed to be working, the government is not a separate entity from the people. It just is the people. It's the people that is the government.
Upon rules,
and so if that were the case, then a state is nothing other than people collectively owning something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So what's so bizarre about controlling your interest in that area? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing more than controlling in my house.
Right.
Or my farmland or whatever.
But like I said,
or my body for that matter.
That's just, in all things, people are given this false dichotomy sense.
And they feel, and honestly, a lot of it, especially with immigration, comes down to feeling bad. They just honestly feel bad. And it's like they think that they could do something about this, and it's just like this doesn't work that way.
Right.
Not saying you can't do anything about people suffering for certain reasons, but this isn't going to help them.
It's also just that it comes back to that laziness where it's like they'd rather feel good right now and say like something should be done versus actually looking at what it would take to get it done. To structure
a system that minimizes this kind of suffering overall.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, and then because once you actually do that, you realize certain things we can't do.
Right. Like we just on the money, or if just that's not the way to do it. Like, is opening your house and letting the bums sleep there really going to solve the homeless problem in your city? No. It's going to destroy your house. A couple of them will get a few good nights sleep until the place is destroyed.
Until the rest of those
you don't have anywhere to live
can't make good decisions or are sociopaths. You
don't have any yeah, exactly. They just take advantage of it. And you don't have anywhere to live anymore, and neither do they.
Right, yeah, exactly. So. Yep. Well, on with the campaign stuff. The trumpeting and everything.
I did think it was interesting that all these people in Arizona, I don't know if you hear about this.
I haven't heard about this one. Chicago stuff was like the last thing.
Chicago was a big one. Yesterday was Arizona. Because that's Tuesdays is the primary coming up. But okay, so there's a bunch of people who are upset that Trump wants to build a wall.
Okay.
So what they did is they got together and blocked off the street.
Yeah.
Sort of made like, I don't know what you would describe, like a wall maybe? Yeah, exactly. To stop the Trump people from getting to the...
That.
Yeah,
people
right.
They didn't want,
yeah, they don't want people to be there, so they block them off with like a sort of a barrier, if you will.
Right.
Sort of wall-ish.
Right, something maybe like a fence?
A fence-ish, wall-ish, area, kind of just blockade like, of sorts.
There might be an old English word, like a bulwark.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't know.
I don't know what you would
Rampart,
call it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was hilarious.
Right,
but I also thought was interesting is apparently they did it, from what I could read, because I didn't read a whole lot on it, but from what I could read, they did it like way late. Like everyone had already been there since like 7, and they had blocked off the highway, like didn't even stop any from getting. Oh, but what I did hear, and I haven't heard this confirmed for real, but I did hear someone report on Twitter that they blocked someone from getting to the hospital and they died. Jeez. Because like an ambulance couldn't get through.
Jeez, because somebody not related
to the
event
death
at all,
in this, yeah, just I mean may or may not, but it wasn't. I didn't have anything. It was just a highway they were trying to get through,
right?
And they blocked it off. So pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was ridiculous. I did put a clip on YouTube where because they had spent like $40 million on anti-Trump ads in Florida, leading up to the primary. And so I don't
watch much TV,
so
I didn't see it.
I didn't see any of them because I don't watch TV either. But
right.
I knew, and he spent like a couple $1 million or something like that. Anyways, but
this
obviously
is
he won by a landslide.
Back to the media stuff that we're talking about. He's just circumventing the main media in general.
Exactly. Well, he's using it, effectively instead of just like shotgunning stuff out.
He's not paying there. He's basically being by playing the fool.
Well, he's getting billions of dollars worth of
free advertising, and then all he has to do is pay for a Twitter manager.
Yeah.
Or he might even do that himself. He might not even have a handler or like a PR person that types out his tweets.
No, he does most of his. Like he doesn't always necessarily be the one who physically hits send, but he just says like, "Hey, put this up," kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
some of them he does too. And he was even joking with that, like, I'm sitting there in my underwear doing tweets, and I get more coverage than
right. Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, after the Florida one, because he won by a huge landslide in Florida,
yeah.
Little Marco is snuffed out.
Yeah.
But I posted this thing on YouTube that said, "Establishment releases a statement after spending millions on anti-Trump ads," and I just played that clip from Predator where it's like, "No blood, no bodies, we hit nothing."
Yeah.
Then it's like, we hit nothing. And I'm like, duh. But it's ominous music as he looks off in the woods. Not a trace, no blood, no bodies, we hit nothing.
Yeah. God, that movie's good.
It is great. It is incredible.
Not to go down a rabbit hole.
You know what was also incredible, which I knew because I'd seen it, but I hadn't watched it until recently.
Yeah.
I forgot what a goddamn masterpiece it is. Was Unforgiven.
Yeah. I know that's one of your
favorite. It's not even a fast-paced movie, but it's just so fucking awesome.
Yeah. I have to watch that again. That one I haven't seen very much. There's a lot of other movies like Predator I've seen plenty of times.
Yeah, Predator's just
There's some
great.
Classics out there
Predator's
like that.
Amazing. One other one that I've heard that's really good that I'm about to watch soon is The Big Short. Obviously not an action movie. It's about the
new one that came out. I'm very interested in that, but it kind of came and went because it was like an indie film.
It was one that was done for like the awards cycle, not really done to try and be a big hit, but
right because it's obviously something a little bit
above
most people's
most people
heads.
Want to worry about like derivatives in the housing market, and
right?
Stuff
Yeah,
back
exactly.
In 08
but that's fascinating to me, like something based on like really telling the story of what's happening.
I thought I was thinking they should have given Peter Schiff a cameo in that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's fascinating about our day and age is that a lot of these problems are like that. Where the reason they exist
be so obvious.
They can be so obvious, but because they're hidden in such high finance, waka waka waka, whatever, like, song and dance. People think it's just they mind them out and they don't realize how they're being played or how the system is so based on nothing.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is, it's not even just like, obviously the everyman doesn't know. They have nothing to do with it one way or the other. Right. But even the people who are involved in that, like finance people,
should
get
be super
obfuscated,
smart.
like we said, like the pissing in the lake thing. Just because it's at that level, they ignore core fundamentals.
Right. And because I can get away with it now, it's got to work forever.
And I've actually heard people say that, like, well, it's worked. Like, speaking of like the monetary system, like it's worked so far, and I'm like, yeah. Me flying down from an airplane with the power of Zeus or whatever, quote unquote, works until I hit the ground. In fact, I'm beating everyone down until I fucking smash my face into the pavement.
For a minute and a half, I have the power of flight.
Right, exactly. Why? How can they say it's not working?
Right, yeah.
I'm flying. And they're like, oh, bam, over. Guess it didn't work. Well, it worked for a little while.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, the recovery is a little difficult.
So when you build a bridge that's like destined, literally mathematically guaranteed to collapse at some point, would you say that it worked just because a few cars get across before it happens?
Exactly. Just because you see it splintering at the bottom, it's
you
like,
have a different definition of work than I do. Yeah. Like, yeah, we made a lot of money when those couple trucks went across. Like, yeah, and then a bunch of people died when it collapsed into the ravine, and you had to start a whole new system.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So, like, I guess the people who drove the truck across, they thought it worked, but
the first 3 guys over the bridge thought it worked too, but the next 10 did not.
So, if your stance is some people are going to make money off this, so that makes it okay. All right, I can't argue with that logically, but as the rest of us who are deciding whether we should get on this bridge, this information's important.
Right, exactly.
And so, but Schiff would like argue with people, and they would say like housing prices are going up, and he's like, yeah, but for when's it going to stop? And they literally these are like finance people would look at it and be like, it will never stop. Right, they would say that and be like, do you math much? Like,
right, yeah, exactly. Do you understand what asymptotically
even if you thought it would be 150 years, to literally say it will never stop.
If nothing else, even if though that's impossible, of course.
Right.
But even if it were possible to never stop, do you understand what approaching infinity means? Where eventually your incremental increase is infinitesimal.
What exponential growth means. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If it's at a certain point, the growth rate just will also end up effectively reaching zero.
And they do the same thing with like trends. They'll be like, well, at this current rate, this will happen at the current levels of this. And someone responded, I think it was on Zero Hedge, like, yeah, when I throw a tennis ball at its current trajectory, it would end up in space.
Right.
But, nothing ever goes that way because forces of the universe come into play.
Right.
Gravity,
entropy,
peaks out. Yeah.
Everything is affected by entropy, money or
and just the laws of the universe. So, the ball does not end up in space.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Because equilibrium forces
we'd all be freaking Superman.
Yeah, and everything comes into play. Yeah. And it peters out and it falls back down.
Yeah, you never lose the energy you get. Every time you walk into the sun, it just adds energy to you.
Especially when you talk about how what we've mentioned before, where all this finance stuff is based on first order wealth. It's just ways of trading it. So you could have exponential growth in financial instruments, but that doesn't change how much fucking ore is in the planet, and how much water and stuff there is, and which is really all you're really talking about. Money is just an ability to trade.
Abstraction of those things.
An abstraction of those first order wealth.
But the problem is if we made it more than that.
Well, they think people. They haven't really. You can't make it more.
You can't, but we've made it to us.
People act like it is. That's right. And to us, they'd actually prefer the instruments that are used to trade the wealth than they would the wealth itself.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why it's bound to collapse because eventually it will be based. It will always lead to inflation when you do that, like massive inflation. Because if you make your primary monetary system
continue forever, and then the money would just become infinitely devalued,
right?
To where you're using an infinite amount of currency to buy something,
right?
But it's
still not helpful.
Doesn't change how much calories you need to survive. Doesn't change how much electricity your house uses.
Doesn't take how much copper it takes to build an electronic device.
Yeah, it doesn't take how much iron it takes to build your car, how much cotton it takes to build your shirt.
Right.
And when it comes down to it, that and human labor are the only things you're actually using your money for.
Right.
Like stocks, the derivatives,
but that's just the problem
policies, all that
the
is
late
based
stages
on
of our empire. So much of it is based on these mistaken ideas and obfuscations and outright lies.
Abstractions.
We have all this thing that we think is wealth, but it's not really wealth. We have all of our labors are directed towards things, and so the prices of the actual goods are not correct anymore because the financial system is so twisted. I've tried to explain this
to people because I saw this video that was about this idiot Robert Reich, who's like an economist for, I don't know if it was for Clinton or somebody, but he's a fucking idiot. Total Keynesian.
Yeah.
And he was saying how that people saying that we need the investment class to have money so that they can create jobs. But he's like, that's not how it works. Jobs are created by spending, which is by, and I'm like, all right, actually they're both wrong. Right. Because you take the standard version of economics from whether it's from Keynesians or just the guy in the street, the standard Republican view, And the Republicans say that, like, companies thriving creates jobs, which creates money, which creates thriving companies.
Right.
The Keynesians say the spending creates thriving companies, which creates jobs, which creates spending.
Right.
But no matter which one you say comes first, you're talking about a closed loop here.
Right.
And that's because they're talking about money. They're not talking about wealth.
Right,
they're
exactly.
Talking about
they're
money.
talking about a closed loop of money. Nothing ever injects into it.
Where does that start? Yeah, where does it start?
Right.
Is it which came first, the company or its workers spending money?
Right, yeah,
and the
exactly.
thing that what did come first is true wealth, natural resources.
Right.
Because if you can envision a planet that had infinite amounts of money, and everyone working there, the human nature's not a problem. They're all robotic ants.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or they're humans, but they work like ants. They don't care about themselves. They're all about industry. And this planet has infinite amount of money, but it's barren like the moon.
Yeah.
And then you have a system, another planet you imagine has no financial system whatsoever, but has every natural resource you can imagine.
Yeah.
Which one is not only quote unquote wealthier, but which one can even work?
Right.
You know what
exactly.
I mean? Only the one with you can do without money. You can't do without natural resources.
Those ants on either of those planets and watch which one builds an empire.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
builds rocket ships and
you
malls.
can give them infinite amounts of money on the other planet, and it won't matter because you can't stack those dollar bills into houses. You can't eat them. You can't build electronics out of paper. You know what I mean? And now it's not even the paper; it's just all electronic. You know,
right?
Ones
Digital.
and zeros.
Yeah. And that's the other thing to me. Like,
so it's so bizarre for them to
I
treat
get in
money
arguments
like
with people
wealth.
sometimes
Money
about
is not
this.
wealth.
This is another thing that kind of comes back to like conservative and libertarian ones. Is like I'll argue against certain things like this, or like the student loan industry or different things, and just loans in general in their current state because technically the bank is not giving you any money. They could not track the serial code off of those bills because they never existed. No. They just gave you digital.
You would be
currency.
surprised at how many people don't know that money is created at the moment of the loan.
Right. Exactly.
And honestly, like the way they treat the money, they teach the money multiplier method is actually wrong. They even admit later that you can go on websites from the federal banks where they say, well, this is simplified so people can understand it, but it's not even true. Like banks do not lend out money that they have in there. They literally create it. When I bought my house when I got a mortgage through the bank and they said, here's the $100,000 that you're loaning for us to buy a house, that money did not exist before then. They didn't take it out of an account and hand it to me. It literally appeared in my account. That was when it was created.
They just said, here's $100,000 in the account.
Right.
And they didn't have to say, take it out of what account. They just said, put $100,000 in account and digitally it's there.
Right.
And then that's why they are afraid of things like cash runs because there is no cash to hand out.
And that's actually a different issue though. Because
it's a different issue.
You can't have a digital money. Like everyone, even as soon as they gave me that money, I could, or like if I deposited or whatever in another bank, everyone can go get their money digitally.
Right.
But the amount of cash that's in a bank, physical, is not even based on how much money. It's based on seasonal fluctuations. They have people whose whole jobs is to determine just how much cash they should have
on hand.
because there's not enough physical cash. There is enough. The money's all there digitally, so you can't have like a digital bank run really.
Right.
You know, because it's all there somewhere.
Right, but that's again to those layers of abstraction.
But now if the loans are all called in, that wouldn't necessarily work because there's always more outs. Because that, as soon as I got $100,000, a corresponding loan of $100,000 plus the interest also appeared.
Right.
So that means that there's never enough money as there is. There's never enough money as there is debt.
Right.
There's always the first dollar is created. There is $1.06 worth of debt or whatever
created. Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean. So you cannot pay it off. That's why people are talking about like paying off the national debt. It cannot be done.
Right. Exactly.
There is literally not enough money in existence to pay off the debt that's in existence.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I mean, you can make sure the government itself isn't the one who has the debt. You know.
Right.
With an exception, and that is that the Constitution grants the government the right to coin money interest-free. They choose to borrow it at interest. Yeah,
which
so
is
they
absurd.
could pay it off in a day if they wanted to, technically, but
Right.
not with the Federal Reserve notes. They would
Right.
have to use U.S. dollars printed by the mint, not by the private banks.
Right, yeah, exactly.
is
And it
just
would
like,
create
literally-
inflation like nobody's business.
There's a quote that said the process by which money is created is so simple the mind is repelled.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not right.
That can't be right.
Can't
It
be
has
right.
to be based on something.
Right,
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense.
But yeah, like, so that kind
At
of
the same
thing,
time, it makes perfect sense.
Makes
when you realize, look, as Lebowski says, look to who would benefit, man.
Yeah, like, who benefits,
Look
man?
to who would benefit, man.
Yeah, like, it's so crazy.
Mind
And
is repelled.
I talk to certain people.
Because that's a video.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, confronting that is exactly what I was going to talk about because
It's literally like staring at those pictures where the stairs are going up and down at the same time.
Right.
You're just
Yeah.
like, wait, what? No,
No,
what?
that doesn't make any
like,
sense.
I can look right here and see stairs,
Escher
right, sure.
painting, you
but
know,
when you
or
back
something.
out and try to look at the system, it just doesn't fucking make any sense.
Right, yeah. Well, like, because I would get people, and I'd be talking about something like student loans, and of course, their traditional mindset is like, no, you need to be responsible for those loans. I'm like, yeah, I get that principle. I'm not disagreeing with that principle. The problem is they never gave you money.
Right.
Technically, no wealth was ever handed to you.
Right.
They basically gave you a certificate saying, we're going to let you go obtain that wealth, and then if you can't pay us for it, we'll take it back. And so it's a little certificate that lets them have the wealth, the actual physical object, if you fail to pay
whatever was
their
security
terms
for the loan. And then with unsecured loans, that's just a risk that they take. And that's, then
like
you add
like
a premium onto the amount of money they're giving the person to compensate you for your perceived risk in that interaction. That's called an interest rate.
Right.
And when there's no risk, because you can't default and the money isn't real to begin with, why the fuck is there an interest rate? That's why I think someone like Bernie Sanders, as much as I disagree with that, that's at least a better, even saying like the government's just going to give you money to go to school, that's even better than them fucking cheating.
Right, because that's, again, back to they could simply print money with the mint, but instead they tend to do loans. Like, one of these is worse than the other. Even though both is probably bad.
Is obviously to treat it just like any other loan.
Right.
And if you think it's too risky, someone would just go get a degree and then bail, then don't loan them money for it or put a huge interest rate on it.
Well, the good thing is they probably wouldn't be making loans for it.
Right, and that would drive the
prices down.
Or you make people put up some sort of security for the loan, like a house or something like that.
Yeah.
And then if you want to, if you really care, like, fuck it, I'm walking, just like you can with a house or a car or anything else. You ruins your credit. The debt is absolved because that was the deal.
That's the
deal.
Parameters of the loan. So there's no moral component like, oh, you defaulted on your debts. Right. What are you, some sort of...
That's the deal.
That's the deal. Like, that's the legal contract.
If this happens, this happens. If that happens, that happens. There's no... For me, morality doesn't enter into it.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the deal.
There is a morality about being a person that does what they say you're going to do. But the problem is that people don't...
From just an internal standpoint. Like, if you go into the thing knowing that you're going to default and fuck them, you can say that that's morally incorrect or whatever. But it doesn't matter within the confines of... We've created a system that functions, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because that's baked in. There's a certain percentage of people that's going to do, and that's
right. And also, it's a case of like it goes back to obfuscating the problem, getting away. Like basically, they're using the government to hide the risk, so that. But the risk is always there, so the cost just goes to the people instead of to the people that actually are doing the business.
Right.
And they're using the force of the government to
the ones who actually should be taking the risk because they're trying to make money.
Right.
They're not the ones who get punished for when that risk actually appears.
Right. The exact same problem in all sectors of the financial industry that's been going on.
But they still get the benefit of... Because normally, like when a mortgage broker puts in their percentage, that's to cover for the risk that this interaction is going to work out.
Right.
And they still do that, but they don't have any risk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And not only that, though, but I mean, it's one of those cases where in any other industry, other than like student loans and a couple of the other financial stuff where they got the bailouts and everything like that, if you had one party that had a contract and could not get out of it because the other party, like that would be so obvious. You know what I mean? Like one party says, hey, I'm going to buy a burger.
Right.
And then the government says, well, we are going to hold the gun to your head and say, you will give them the money for the burger, but they're not really required to give you the burger.
Right.
Like, we're not going to back you up if you say, hey, I didn't get the burger.
Yeah.
We're only going to back them up if you don't pay for the burger.
Right.
And it's like, this is obviously, but then they just go like, well, you shouldn't be these freeloaders. Like, yes, I agree. We shouldn't have welfare and freeloaders.
But this is if that system happens.
If the real system was set the way it was, like I said, you wouldn't
why is this not a problem for any other industry that has loans?
Right, yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean?
And it's done to some extent in other industries, but not the same way. Like the bailouts. Like instead of them saying you can't default on these, the government just swoops in and pays for it.
Like with the auto industry, and
stuff like that. So the same problem. Those who took the risk are not being held to hold the risk. People who did not take the risk are getting left with the bucket.
All that really does is give them to might as well take big risks. Because if they win big. If they lose, they get bailed out.
Somebody else pays for it.
So, like, how would your betting patterns change in a poker tournament if you got, like, a free rebuy? Right. Versus you have to front your own red
Everybody
money.
else has to pay in, but
if you lose, if you win, you still get the winning.
If you win, you get their money. If you lose, you take some of their money and buy back in.
Or they just pay your rebuy, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Of course, you're going to play a little different.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It'd be logically, makes sense to do it.
Right. If you win, you get to keep the money. If you lose, though, they pay you to buy back in. You don't get to keep it, but it doesn't cost you anything.
Right, it doesn't cost you anything.
Or even, actually, that's even a bad example, because they totally did get to keep it.
Right,
so they totally did get to keep it. So, yeah, like, why not be more risky?
Right.
Why not be more, less conscientious with what you're doing? Why not be stupider about it?
It's ridiculous. And people don't understand that.
Right, like I said, it's why it's that mind reeling thing. People can't accept how stupid it is.
Right.
How based off of nothing it is.
Because the argument, it's a totally different argument to say like someone like Bernie Sanders about the moral aspect of just making education free or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Like that, sure we can talk about that, but that's not really the issue here.
Right, yeah.
Because just like in Denmark, I don't think, or some other country, I'm just using that as an example because I don't know the minutiae of their system.
Right, like some Norwegian country.
In any country where it's supposedly working, I still don't think that's morally correct But whatever, you know, it's
what is viable and what is moral is not the same thing.
Right.
And the best is to have one that is viable and moral.
Yeah, and I only don't think it's moral in the sense of people not having a choice.
Right.
You know, if someone wants to work in a system where they, because otherwise you're just really paying insurance.
Right.
Like health insurance. Instead of saying, you know what, maybe I can do better on my own, but I'd rather have lock in the security of, you know,
everybody pays in ahead of time. As an insurance policy to say if you need some help at some point in the future, there's social services there to take care of.
Right.
It's a statewide
mandated. It's just a way to eliminate the outlier scenarios, both good and bad. Right. You're never going to have that situation where you break out and there are billions because it's just the system takes that from you. But you're also never going to be in the street either. And some people want that choice. That's cool. I don't want that. But
But yeah, like you said, that's just a choice of how you want to live and how you want your society to function kind of question. But
you still have to make sure it works
first, but you still have to make sure it works first, and America's doing the worst of all worlds. It's doing neither a functional version of socialism nor a functional version of free market. It is some bastard in between where different people are getting picked as winners and losers, and the cost of all these bad decisions is being shunted off into the people.
It's sort of like on Maslow's hierarchy of needs of like philosophical ethics, like where what's his name, C.S. Lewis was talking about the 3 different levels of ethics. I forget the exact but he said like the ship is in the ocean. The first one is like, why is it even here? Like, what is this and why is it here? Yeah. And then there's like, where are we going? And then there's like, where should we be going? Right. You know what I mean? And so they're only dealing with the where should we be going without building up the pyramid first of, is this even like, what is a ship first of all? And is it even going to be able to go there?
Right, yeah. How do you sail a ship? Do we go what is a ship? How do you sail it? Where are we going? You know?
And then where should we be going?
Right, yeah.
Or where should we try to go?
Right, yeah, exactly.
And they're focused all on like, this would be nice if this and this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, but is that even possible, first of all?
And it's just like they're not willing to address the complex problems behind that.
Just the symptoms.
Even if it is possible, sometimes it's possible with things they don't want to concede. Like, yeah, sure, it is possible. When you have a homogenous population, relatively small with no immigration. That's a bad thing. We can't think about that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the world is the way it is. And if if you're saying this is my ultimate goal, then this is the only ways you can accomplish it.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
So weird. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that play out, but it's frustrating when people don't. And also keep encountering this annoying, I don't know if you could call it like a logical fallacy, it's more like a bias of some kind.
Right.
A psychological bias where anytime you criticize, and I'm not even talking about totally disregard, but offer criticisms of any sort of train of thought, the bias is that like
you're automatically the other side and
the other major side. First of all, to see something like if you're like, man, I don't like George Bush, like you like Obama? It's like, what the fuck is that? I didn't say that. Or I don't like red t-shirts. You like black t-shirts, or just whatever they perceive to be the opposite.
I don't like the New York Jets. So what are you like like whatever the rivalry is in the
like
particular
the Mets and the Yankees or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like the Yankees.
You're not from Maine.
How can you be a Mets fan, bro?
Right? Yeah.
What?
Exactly. I don't like either of them.
I don't watch baseball. You fuck.
Right. Yeah. People can't accept it. Just. But that's what we're talking about. Like, people will get painted in these ideas
about it.
Right, yeah, like you're either for us or for them, but then they can't even acknowledge.
And the first mistake is always assuming that it's binary like that. Like just like that. You're like, dude, how many baseball teams are there? Right. Why would I necessarily be like a Mets one or the other?
Right, yeah, exactly. There's more in this world than just 2 baseball teams.
But that's just, like I said, it goes back to how the human mind works in a lot of situations.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, some of that's just human nature. We're tied into the rivalries and the things within our world, but that's what's scary.
And this disregarding of human nature is what allows people to say stupid shit like, "It doesn't matter what you vote for; it's just important that you vote."
Yeah,
like that doesn't really. That's like a tautology or a platitude that just doesn't really make any sense.
It's not a tautology.
It's not a tautology. It's a platitude. It just doesn't really make any sense. Like
it's a statement that's so
that's
broad,
words that string together that I understand the words themselves, but what does that really mean?
Yeah. I always love that too. Like they say, you're throwing your vote away if you vote for this guy.
Doesn't make any sense. I mean, they say both of those things.
Yeah, like okay, I get it in the one sense. The guy you want is not going to win, so you might as well pick the lesser of 2 evils or something.
Which I don't like that argument. Anyway,
but it's like, but then that's a moral argument. That's not like or that's a practical argument with a moral twist to it. Because like the practical, you cannot win, so basically you need to acknowledge that. Okay, sure, my independent party candidate.
But all you're really saying is if I vote for this guy or this guy, the one I really want is not going to win. But that doesn't mean that you vote. Like a vote for not X can never be a vote for X.
Right.
Like if you vote for Trump, is a vote for Hillary because he can't win, kind of
thing.
Yeah. No, that is not logically correct.
Right. Yeah.
Voting for X cannot be a vote for
even if
X.
that was logically correct in the sense of like, let's say a particular race, they were like, don't vote for Trump because if he gets the candidacy, he will not beat the other guy. Let's say that was true. So, like, you got to vote for the other Republican because they're the only one that can beat the Democrat. Let's pretend that was true.
That could be logically true. Like, one will not win and the other one might.
Right. But that's still the moral aspect of
a certain candidate.
Your vote is like, your vote's not that important. They like to sell you on this. I'm like, yes, everything counts in large amounts, so voting does count.
Right.
But it only counts because you got to create a big enough consensus that they can't hide it. You know what I mean? Like, voting in this country only counts when it gets big enough that they can't obviously divert from it so much that it becomes obvious that they're ignoring it.
With it. Because I really, and I mean, this would be an interesting thing to explore too, because, and one comments on my YouTube channel summed it up fairly perfectly, but I do believe that there's a lot of shenanigans at every level.
Yeah.
Do I believe that, like, there's some people sitting in a smoky room who have literally decided already and there's nothing we can do about it? No, I don't think it's that. Yeah. I think, like we've seen with what
there's
we're
just
doing with
parties with much more power and influence than
they control the media and they control the money, and that's always been enough. And I think the local people do things like shuttling people in, having people vote twice, random little things like that, sending out fake flyers to try to confuse people, changing the times of the polling, maybe even fiddling with a voting machine here and there. Right. Like, I think there's shenanigans anytime they get an opportunity.
I don't think there's a central control room
where they're like, hit the winner, bam.
Right.
And then there's other people coming out and saying, like, well, Trump is just a controlled opposition. Like, they put him out there knowing that it'll take the vote, and he's really going to be the Manchurian candidate. And someone commented, it was like, you know what? If someone out there has had that plan to that level where they knew that Trump would come in as an outsider, pick up most of the vote, and then still do what they want, they deserve to be in charge. If they're that fucking smart, we don't have a chance anyway.
Right? If they can run smart on this many cats,
and they're controlling it to that level, there's nothing you could do anyway.
Right.
But they're not. That's just absurd.
Right. Yeah. And it is one of those things. Like, are there interests behind Trump that we don't know about?
Probably.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, the other person that put it in the most succinct way I could say is, like, some people again talk about, like, well, what if Trump's not really that conservative and all this kind of, like, sweat. And it's like, okay, Trump is a 50-50 shot.
Right.
Everything else is a guaranteed loss. Which one do you want?
Right. Well, they say, you're like, you don't know what Trump's going to do. I'm like, right. We know exactly what the other people are going to do. The Bushes, the Clintons, and it's crap.
Right.
And also, like, I lost what I was going to say. But anyway, continue. Oh, it's funny, the people who say, all the people who say he's not the conservative were the ones who are fucking getting all riled up about how important it was to vote for fucking Romney and McCain.
Right,
like, they're not conservative like Romney and McCain. Yeah, these bastards.
He was in a prison in Vietnam. He's obviously conservative. Yeah, that's how that works.
Right.
Right, yeah. Like, it's possible to be a prisoner of war and still betray your country.
Right.
You realize?
And so, like, it's not about thinking that Trump really gives a shit about us. It's about picking the person.
Principles, anyway.
It's about picking the person whose interest in doing what he wants for himself and what he thinks is right is going to work in our interests also.
Right.
Like I've said before, I think, like, maybe I'm wrong about this. He could be just, but we have many, many years of seeing Trump doing what he does to know, like, we know what we get with him. Yeah. Not necessarily as a politician, but as a person, we know what he's about. Yeah. And I genuinely think he cares about America succeeding.
I think he fits that old school...
Even if he's wrong about doing and does it wrong and nothing he tries works, that's what he does.
Yeah, I think he fits that old school... America is all about, like, big business and doing, prospering.
And, like, look at it this way. They act like he's going to get in power and become this maniacal Hitler tyrant. I'm like, this guy has been in charge of thousands of people in organizations where he has a lot more power over them than he will over the country as president. Yeah. And he's not a tyrant there. Right, Ask any of the people he works for. He's fair. Like, obviously, he's an authoritarian. Right. Because that's just his personality. When he sees something, he's going to be like, I'm going to do something about this.
I give a command, get it done.
And with the way the presidential powers have been so vastly blown up, that's not good anymore, because he will be able to do things that are unconstitutional, which... Thanks a lot, people, for allowing Bush and Obama and everyone else to be able to slowly get away with that anytime your person is in power. But like I said, he's not shown tyrannical
it's
tendencies
again comes down to
when you could get away with a lot more of that.
He could run with an iron fist. Double plus crime think stuff. Right. It's like they hate him because he represents the working class of America, and they're too blue collar and brusque and racist, and like I have to acknowledge to everybody else that I'm better than those.
And it's so bizarre to see that just because of the way he says it, like in a blue collar way, or maybe he's just blustery, kind of buffoonish way, that he says it like
he knows his audience. But
first of all, and this is his personality. But like, what is he really saying that like? That we should stop illegal immigration? Fucking 70+% of the country thinks that.
But that's my point.
You know what I mean? Like, this isn't some bizarre stance.
That's the thing. That's why he's so popular, and that's why the other people hate him so much. Is because this has always been the view of the majority of the country, but they've tried to shout them down for so long because they view that as racist and as...
Well, that's why they
view the majority of the country as stupid people holding them back from their special utopia.
And it's funny when they see these polls like, oh, Hillary's going to beat him. So I'm like, well, first of all, then you can just be quiet because you don't have anything to worry about.
Right.
But second of all, like, you see how much shit, like, if I even mention something about, like, Trump not being the devil, how, like, vociferously you have to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And, like, if you're thinking that people are going to answer these polls all honestly, we're like, you're not voting for Trump, are you? No. Okay, bye. Like,
right, yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Nah, don't worry about it, I'm not.
And also, like, you could tell from, like, the reports on, like, Chicago and everything else, the Trump rally people were substantial, lots of them, from all ages. And they just were the quiet ones. Like, everybody else got all, fuck this, down with Trump, you racist. And they were the ones who just didn't say anything, didn't do anything, try to get out of there, because this is not their personality type to create a confrontation over a political disagreement.
Right.
And so, just because they're quiet, it's still the same problem. Quiet majority. Like, the majority of Americans think
when
this
also
way.
people point to, like, okay, some old fucking crusty dude punched a protester on the way out. Like, yeah, that's fucked up. But something what Cernovich was saying, he's like, okay, how many people have been to Trump rallies? Millions at this point? 1.5 million?
Right.
He's like, we've had 10 people acting the fool, maybe? He's like, that'd be the safest city in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'd go send my kids walking to school in that city any day.
Right. Yeah. I saw that quote. That was a good bit. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it'd be the safest city in the world. Yeah.
Right.
And, like, you know, and also it's a disparity in reporting, too. You get, like, the one guy who charged the stage.
Right,
you
and
know,
that guy gets interviews on
right,
scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what were you trying to accomplish?
Well, I was trying to make my voice heard and, like, you know, tell them that we're not like Trump, the rest of the world. We're the good whiteys. We don't actually, you know, we're the ones you can get one over on easily, like we should be.
I just want to start making bets with people who
really believe he's not going to make it.
Well, not. I have bets that he's going to make it already. Don't worry about that. I got this fat bet that he's going to make it. And I got in early because I know I could see what's happening. Right. And even if I didn't know that if it was going to happen for sure, I could tell that the trend was out. Right. There was an incongruency in the line.
What's interesting to me is it'll be interesting to see if they try to pull any shenanigans with, like, the
brokered convention, stuff like that. At this point, it looks like he'll make the 1237 delegates.
Right. And like I said, so
that brings up a different point when you're done.
But the big question is, that big question is, like I said earlier, if the voting gets out big enough that to do anything would be so obvious that they're just ignoring the people.
Well, it's already going to be.
It's already like
because if he doesn't make it, he'll be 30, maybe 100 delegates short or something like that.
Right.
It'll still be very obvious that this is the person that people have chosen.
Right.
And what's especially interesting about that is that they're not talking about, like, going with Cruz.
Yeah.
They're talking about, like, getting rid of both the major candidates and bringing in someone who no one has voted for.
Right, exactly.
Like a Trump or Ryan who haven't even had a single delegate.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And, like, that shows you that they're not. Because, like I said, I do think they control Cruz, but they don't like him, so they'd still rather have someone else. Right. But that brings up the
control
point.
A little bit, but he's still got his initial popularity off of similar things to Trump.
At least ideologically, he's been fairly consistent and straightforward. I do think that they'll be able to control him to the extent that he won't do all the real stuff the way we would want. But what I think is that if he's really not an establishment person, we'll see it because he'll get out when it's completely obvious that there's no chance that he can win.
Right.
Because at which point staying in would only try to pull delegates away from Trump for the convention. So if he's doing that, then we know for sure that he's working with them to just fuck over Trump. Because at this point, it's very, very unlikely, but there is still a chance he could win. If we get to the point that he can no longer realistically win and he still stays in, then the only reason he would do that is to try and
the only reason he'd still be spending money to keep the
and to spend time is to pull delegates away from Trump for the knowing that he wouldn't even be the second choice.
Right.
You know what I mean? Knowing that they would fuck him over too.
Broker him over to go with Kasich or something like that.
Or Romney.
This guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I've never heard of this guy before. And all of a sudden he's like, they're trying to talk him
governor of Ohio.
Right, but they made this big deal like Kasich wins Ohio. So
so what?
So what? Yeah, of course he did. He's the mayor.
Minnesota, or he's a governor.
Governor, right? Yeah, not mayor, but governor. Yeah, but I mean, like, okay, woohoo.
Yeah, who cares?
He won
Did you see his giant confetti party? Like, he won one state.
No.
Yeah, like he won his one state and had his party like he just won the election. Like,
that's what I'm saying. That's what was so weird about it. Like, I remember, like, just a few headlines, and they seem to have this really hard, like, Kasich. And I was like, who is this fucking guy? I've never heard of him. I don't live in Ohio.
Right.
You know, and it's like, he's not been, like, I remember before that even, they had a few debates, like the initial debates he wasn't in, right? Or
was in them all? There was just so many people.
So many people, and he was like, on nobody's radar. Nobody mentioned it. And then he just happened to be one of the ones that hung around the longest.
Because they're giving him whatever to hang around.
Right,
purposely just pulled delegates away.
And so basically they talked about him once or twice about, like, hey, look, Kasich said this. I'm like, who?
Yeah.
Like, I literally didn't even know he was in the debates, even though he'd been there for, like, years. because he was like a fucking nobody and he hadn't said anything worth a damn.
Yeah, and it's the same thing they do with Cruz, because like even Trump was saying this in his last speech where he was like, they make a big deal like, oh, Cruz is the only one who can beat him. He's beat him 4 times in 4 states. And he's like, I beat him in 20 states.
Right, yeah,
if winning in 4 states means you can win, what is beating you in 20 states?
Right.
Like, it's fucking idiots.
Yeah. Well,
so it looks extremely likely that he'll win the nomination, and it's pretty solid chance that he'll get the delegates to where they can't do a broker convention, especially if he wins. If he wins Arizona big, and he has to win California.
I don't think it would be as hard of a thing as people think. Like, people think even if that happens, it's going to be a hard fight versus the Democrats. I'm not so sure.
I think he'll win either against Bernie or Hillary.
I think he would have.
I called it already, the biggest landslide since Reagan.
Right. I think he would have a harder time with Bernie than he would with Hillary.
Because
Hillary is so unlikable.
She will melt down. He will just ragdoll her in a debate.
Right. It'll be that Hulk scene with Loki.
Yeah,
you know, like...
she is so used to getting fake. Like, did you see this article? I don't remember if it was Vox or Cernovich or somebody put up where they were like, this news company, they got a chance to sit down with the presidential frontrunner, past Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, First Lady, and the question they ask her, like, what's your guilty pleasure snack? What's your favorite rom-com? And like
stuff from The View.
You think Trump's gonna
stuff from The View.
You think Trump's gonna just be like, oh, I'm sick and tired of hearing about these damn emails. Like,
no,
exactly. He's gonna just savage her.
Right, yeah. No,
and she's so scripted, and she will not be able to prepare for him.
The only leg that Hillary would have on Trump is that the people who are in the middle and feel that voting for Trump would make them racist,
or that he's being
and then he's
mean.
lost them. Anyway.
You think he's really going to get those votes? Give me a break.
Those people are voting off of some,
and he may actually pull away a lot of people who were going to go for Bernie. Because they just want a non-establishment person. Now they're pissed off at what Hillary did. Like, it's less about necessarily his ideology for a lot of these swing people than it is about, like, they just want to change. Fuck the system.
The system's not working for us. So
they're both pissing off.
But
all the right
I honestly think Bernie would give him a bigger run because there are people who think that, but they think that what you need to do to fix the system is to go towards socialism. Because there will be
there's a lot of the conservatives who were like, never Trump, and then a lot of the swing voters will go for Bernie too. So
well, not even the swing voters, but I mean, there's a harder core of them who would just be like, this is what I want out of the country. But there's also a lot of Democrats who Trump's picking up who he wouldn't if it was him against Bernie. He would if it was against Hillary, but he wouldn't if it was against Bernie too. Right. And some of the hardcore like conservatives and neocons are not going to vote for Trump. They just won't vote at all. Right. So that would be a closer race, I think. Much closer. I still think he would win. Because in a debate, he'll just look like the old fool that he is. Right. And also, I think, like I said, I think this is a really big case of the silent majority issue coming up. Right. Like but in the past, the most of Americans weren't that involved and weren't trying to rock the boat, so to speak. Right. But they've had so many decades of the system ruining their economy, ruining their job prospects, changing their culture against their will, making all these pernicious atmosphere of political correctness that nobody wants to deal with anymore. Just let me tell my goddamn jokes when I'm drunk. Exactly. Like when I have a few beers, just let me tell my jokes. Like, no, I get it. Everything is racist. Everything is sexist. Right? Yeah, it's too late. You beat me over the head with that too long. You're racist waddle early. So right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's good. Right, exactly. You can't use it. I'm numb there in that. You know what's fun is I can't wait to hear what his nickname for Hillary is. He had like Jeb. And who's weak, low energy. He has little Marco, Lion Ted. Right. He said he's got one queued up for Hillary, but he's saving it. I can't wait. If nothing else, it's just so fascinating because he knows how to manipulate this kind of media stuff. Like he's so good. And one thing that people take note of this is a lot of people, especially intellectually honest and just intellectually minded people who are focused on dialectic. One thing that you instinctively do is answer accusations. Yeah, and you respond to them. Which you notice he never does. Yeah. When she said, like, they played a clip of Hillary, and they were like, she's saying you're divisive and racist. What do you say about that? Instead of being like, look at my record, I'm not divisive. Instead of actually doing it, he's like, I think she's a disgrace to this country and an embarrassment. Yeah. Just ignored it. Like, who cares what the fuck they say? Like, it's one of those things. You notice that. You have to teach yourself not to do it. You got to teach yourself to do it. Like I said, people who are intellectually honest, if someone's like, you're a rapist. You're like, what? No, I'm not. Show me where I've raped someone. You know what I mean? And you start following their frame. Instead of being like, you're a fucking weak ass piece, low energy piece of shit. Right. The thing is, you have to acknowledge. You have to recognize if there's someone who is coming at you with an honest thing. Exactly. But that's so rare these days. Right. It's better to err on the side of like being a little. These days, you still have a lot of people, and like I would have counted myself. That's why pseudo-dialectic is the best. Right. But I have to teach myself this too because my first instinct is exactly what you're talking about. Where like, here's my reasoned argument. Like, no, you're wrong. But that's because my inherent good nature assumes that a good nature on the other
projection
part.
Too. Like I don't just go up and falsely accuse people of bullshit.
So I'm assuming
there's some sort of evidence that they're just mistaken about.
Right. I'm assuming they were just mistaken about something. Right. They saw something out of context, or
they just didn't understand or don't know the real facts.
Right.
That's not normally.
But that's not normally the case. They're just
so as soon as you recognize
they're arguing bad faith.
Normally,
so
at least
don't engage in that sense.
Exactly. In most situations that aren't like intellectual, in a presidential debate, you probably can't even give them the benefit of the doubt. But like online, I'll give them like one good like reply, and then after that, if they're just, you can tell them like, all right, that's them, just gonna rip you to shreds.
And it's fun.
It is
tell you it's fun.
It's a lot. You can get some. As soon as you get realize, because originally you're infuriated. Like, why can these people just not even address
this from what I'm saying?
And they won't even address, like, they literally just skip over what I'm saying and just repeat the same thing, and it's like infuriating.
Once you realize you're dealing with bad faith or a spurg or whatever it is,
then it's gonna be
just
hilarious.
go for it and have some
fun. I've messed with some people and like you just laugh. What's funny is you just throw out stuff. See which one riles them up, and then just hone in on, just hammer it down. Just like at the little mark of it. Anything that sticks, just go berserk on it. And it's the best thing ever. That's what I can't wait to do. They already had the barking dog ad with Hillary. That's so great. It's just Putin laughing. Like,
exactly.
Good stuff.
Well, probably a good place to wrap it up here. We're already about an hour 10 into the
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's English in English for the week. Check it out on englishinenglish.net.
Boom.
On the YouTube page. And we're going to try and get back in the swing of things here. Had a little bit of a break because of scheduling conflicts. The 9-to-5s and life and everything gets in the way. But it's interesting times. There's much to talk about, as you can see. All right. Adios.
See ya. All I think